Welcome to our town on Eagle Communications Channel 2. I'm your guest host, James Holland with Black & Company Realtors. Your normal host, Dennis Weiss, is unavoidably detained today, and so he has asked me to step in. And someone else who is also unavoidably detained today is our usual guest, Mr. David Dillner, City Manager of Abilene. So we're going to kind of get an update from Dave on some things that are going on. And I think one of the first things looking at the news and what's going on in the city, you know, there's 4 or 5 kind of big headline sort of things. And I think one that people are really going to want to talk about and at least be informed about is a continuation of the First Street improvement project. And for those of you who are local, you know that First Street was widened, concreted, a wonderful project, and I think relatively speaking went off rather smoothly. But I think a lot of people driving down First Street come to the intersection with Buckeye and go, you know, what happened? Did the money run out or what happened? So can I explain why this is two projects that seem to really run together well?
Sure, James. Thank you for actually bringing up that project, because you're right. People drive down First Street and they say, wow, this is a great project, but what happens right when you get there at the intersection of First and Buckeye? And the answer is the money didn't run out in the strict sense. East First Street was a $3.2 million project that is being paid for with a 5 mils on the property tax bill. But the First and Buckeye intersection, the reason that was pulled out from the East First Street project was because that intersection, because it is on K-15, is eligible for state funds. And so in lieu of doing it all locally, with local dollars, we opted to do a 90% KDOT funding on that project with a 10% local match. So leveraging state dollars to improve city infrastructure is always a good idea. That $822,000 project will complete the First Street corridor from the west side all the way to the east side and really give it a nice clean look.
Yeah, and that was, you know, the first phase of that, which was west of Buckeye many years ago, you know, the heavy truck traffic you had at DeBruce Grain down there, certainly, you know, it needed to be concrete. Anybody that's been down there know the asphalt just wasn't holding up very well. Right. So that is, you know, one of the major truck routes in the town, and a great project. And it's good that you mentioned that it's on K-15 Buckeye, because isn't there an ongoing phased-in project to improve Buckeye pretty much for the entire city?
That's correct. Again, it's kind of the benefit of having a state highway going through your town. We have the advantage of utilizing another KDOT program, the CLINK program, or Connecting Links for long verse. And what that is state funding that allows us to mill and overlay or rehabilitate and maintain Buckeye Avenue from city limits to the south to city limits to the north. So we're actually beginning another phase of that, or will be beginning another phase of that this summer, as we go from 8th Street to about 13th Street with a mill and overlay.
Yeah, yeah, and that's over the years, that's going to finally, we're going to get that along and in good shape. And I think there's some other state highway related roads, or formerly state highway related roads, that probably need to be looked at as well. And one of those is coming up. And if you head out 3rd Street, of course, which actually used to be Old 40, the old route of Old 40, there's been some utility work out there probably the last 2 or 3 weeks in preparation for a project. So you want to share a little bit about that, about the 3rd Street project out there?
Sure. The utility work that you're seeing on 3rd Street right now is actually related to the installation of a fiber line that's being extended out west. But our project is going to be actually the first use of our local street improvement money that was approved in November of 2012. The voters approved a 25-cent increase to the sales tax. All told, that will generate about $3 million over a 10-year period to allow us to maintain a pretty stiff local street improvement program. And one of the first projects that we're going to be doing out of the gates this year is going to be a rehabilitation of Northwest 3rd from Washington to Van Buren. And that'll be a huge benefit to specifically truck traffic, because they're the ones that have been utilizing that road and causing a lot of rutting and deterioration on that road. But obviously the entire Abilene community will benefit from those improvements.
Well, a follow-up to that quarter-cent sales tax for road improvements, which you mentioned is $3 million over 10 years. What's kind of some of the next roads on that? Being around town, I know that probably 14th Street and maybe even Van Buren, which are major roads. Talk a little bit about those, and then the unique things about Van Buren being both in the city and the county, and the complications that might cause on improvements.
Yeah, one of the things that we are looking at right now is a project on 14th Street, and actually that project that we're looking at, we kind of explored the KDOT Geometric Improvement Program, which is the same program we're using on the First and Buckeye intersection, and we actually found out that we would be eligible to put in an application for that intersection, which would include basically a block in either direction. So we could actually go clear past the high school in doing improvements to that 14th Street corridor. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking at potentially as a project coming up in the near future. In terms of the 25-cent sales tax, we've got actually many streets that are kind of delineated as top priority for those funds. And we kind of prioritize them based on the traffic counts, traffic volumes that use those, and also try to spread out that money throughout the community. So we're not necessarily going to be doing streets that 10 people live on, but we're going to try to do streets that are more of our collector streets that tend to get a lot of traffic and that are kind of past the point where a chip seal would be an appropriate maintenance response. What we've been doing this year, we kind of looked at that list and we said, Northwest 3rd is probably a good project because of the volume, because it is one of the main corridors into town. And then we've got some additional projects, like for example, we get a lot of complaints about they're on Old 40 or Van Buren, right as you get past 3rd Street to the south. It's kind of rough and bumpy. That might be one of the projects that we also look at this year as we spend down kind of our balance for the year. So we've got a few projects like that are smaller, and it really depends on the amount of money we actually bring in any given year for sales tax. But then the next year's projects, we'll start to look at that in the fall and early winter to get our plan ready for the next year. So I actually don't know what we're going to be doing next year specifically, but I do know that we do have a list of various street projects that's available on our website that folks can kind of check out and let us know what they think.
Yeah, and one kind of not off the beaten path sort of areas, and something I'll bring up is West 11th Street south of the high school and the middle school. It's currently gravel, and I know just through the series of annexations that occurred over the years, that's the condition of the roadway there. With the school district's plans, is upgrading that road been mentioned as part of their plans? I know they're looking at possibly an elementary school, some other improvements in the area. So have there been those discussions?
Not yet, not specifically. We know that obviously if the school district initiative goes through, that there'll be additional traffic volumes in that area, and that might definitely be something we need to look at. We're kind of waiting and seeing, determining on what that April 1st election comes out with, but that's something that we kind of have in the back of our mind.
Yeah, I don't know if a lot of the school buses use that at all, but that's just throwing that out there to see what kind of conversations come of that. It seemed like something that might be necessary. And one of the things about Van Buren, is that it, before you hit the curve, the north curve, there's a bridge over Mud Creek, and that's in the county. And I know that they've been racking their brains trying to find a way to improve that, because bridges are big ticket items, and getting on the list with KDOT to make those type of improvements is an arduous and very long process. So I don't know, has that been resurrected, or is that still kind of on the county's list? Maybe you don't, maybe you're not aware of where that's at.
I'm not exactly aware of where that's at. I'm assuming it's still in the county's list of projects they're trying to get KDOT funding for. But that's one of the interesting challenges with 14th Street all the way to Van Buren and then south toward the curve of Old 40 is that you go in the city and out of the city and into the county and back into the city throughout that whole stretch. And the ideal situation is that the city and the county coordinate on a project that could address large chunks of that street or that roadway at the same time. The good news is that from what my understanding is most of the base on that street is rock solid and in good shape. But for example, on our 14th Street project that we're looking at in the near future, potentially, if KDOT funding allows, we'll be looking at the shoulders. I shouldn't say shoulders. They're actually 4 lanes on 14th Street west of Buckeye, and really they're glorified shoulders. And so one of the things that we've talked about is going in and actually building those shoulders up to be actual street lanes, so people feel more comfortable driving on them.
Sure.
Including additional traffic signalization, or I guess enhanced traffic signalization, and maybe some different things to make pedestrian traffic and bicycling more accommodating in that corridor.
Yeah, and that's another challenge on that is you've got your box culvert, and the old box culvert sitting there right near the middle school and the high school, which doesn't necessarily, it's not wide enough to allow for 4 lanes of traffic. So there's definitely a lot of challenges in the area, and with the schools there, the traffic generation certainly warrants those improvements, and it's good that the city's looking at those things. City and county on roads, and you mentioned First Street, that intersection there. Once again, that's a project that maybe the city and county would work together on.
Yeah, there's lots of opportunities for intergovernmental partnerships. We've definitely utilized our partnership with KDOT, and there's countless opportunities to work with the county as well to leverage additional dollars. So those are things we need to look at.
If we can get the KDOT off the prime real estate there at I-70, that'd probably be nice too.
Yeah.
But, anyway, that's another discussion we won't get into.
Right.
Are there any other topics? I had a few written down that I think are kind of important and have been on the front of the city's plate, and that is the old city auditorium, the east side of the city building. It used to be the gym, and up until 10 years ago, the Parks and Rec department used it.
Right.
It's been mothballed very well, as far as I can tell. But there's a new interest in that, and with the fire department and police department, kind of how it's kind of shoehorned into the space,
right,
with all this extra space back behind it. Talk about the efforts there and kind of what some of the vision that people are putting out there is on that building. Yeah,
that's a good point, James. This project has kind of been on our minds for some time now. The city actually started looking at its city hall facilities at least in 2002, probably even before that. And so that project has kind of come back up. We're kind of in the same position as the school district in many respects. We have an old building that in many respects is outdated and obsolete for what we're trying to do. In fact, the police and fire department, they're definitely pigeonholed, if using your vernacular, with respect to their facilities, because there are a lot of things that they would like to do, and there are a lot of things that they probably should be doing with respect to facilities that, because of the facility that we have, they're just not able to do. So as part of that, what we've kind of had in our back pocket is the library and pool sales tax will be coming off the rolls in 2017. So the thought process was, at that time, we need to be ready for an effort to go back to the voters with a question of financing for city hall improvements, and whatever that looks like, whether it be renovating the existing structure or altogether building new. That's something that we've formed a city hall committee to review, and we had our first meeting a few weeks ago, as a matter of fact, and the primary exercise of that meeting was to tour the facility, and then also to kind of begin a vision process for what that facility and those facilities need to look like. And I think the good news is we have a very good committee that's very interested in Abilene and the city facilities, and I think they'll come out with a good recommendation for the city moving forward. So we'll see. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with that, but I think the interesting thing will be the balance between, do we rehabilitate the existing structure, which could come at a considerable cost, or do we build new, which could be more accommodating to our modern facilities. But I think the overwhelming question is, what is the need for facilities today, and what will facilities need to be in the future? Because whatever we do, it'll have to be a facility or facilities that are around for 50 plus years.
Yeah, the building is a landmark, and there are a lot of potential adaptive reuses for it that you could look across the state and see that there are lots of opportunities. In fact, right now there's a conversation going on in Salina about the old hospital building there and what to do with that. A personal editorial would be that it's a extremely valuable asset to the community in a lot of ways. But once again, it's probably antiquated for a city hall use, and there are potential adaptive reuses for it that are, in a lot of ways, there's tax incentives for private companies and others to do things with those type of buildings. And in fact, the city has been historically and more recently very supportive of that type of effort. And so you might mention some of the, kind of wrapping up our session today, some of the changes that have been made to the downtown neighborhood revitalization program to once again really support adaptive reuse and investment in older buildings.
The city has been, we took our downtown revitalization, well, we took our neighborhood revitalization program and we carved out a special piece of it for downtown revitalization. And so where the previous program that is still applicable in a lot of the neighborhood parts of the older part of community, we've taken a downtown approach, which is if you do a new or renovation of an existing building and increase its value by a certain amount, you're eligible for a 90% rebate on your increased property taxes. So that's one of the tools that we've outlaid in the last few months to kind of get people started thinking about renovating buildings and using space that's not necessarily used to its highest use right now. And we're seeing some interest in that, and we're hoping to roll out some additional programs maybe in the near future that could be used to leverage that and other opportunities as well.
Yeah, and it's always a positive sign to see people investing in their buildings downtown, because I personally have always maintained that the downtown is in a lot of ways the economic incubator for entrepreneurs, because it's affordable space, it's flexible space in a lot of ways. In some ways it's not, but whenever you see, for instance, down here half a block away, when you see sheet metal coming off a building and a building being re-bricked, like it's going on at the Farm Services building down here, that always piques everybody's interest. It gets people thinking about improving what we do have and those assets that have long been paid for over and over, but still have some useful life with just a little investment in them. And the city's been a good partner in trying to make those things happen. So I definitely have always commended the city for that, and I hope they continue. So that's good news. Is there anything parting just things you want to mention while we wrap it up here?
No, I think we've covered some pretty good topics, and I'd like to thank you all for continuing to keep me on the show. Anytime we can get out there and let people know what's going on, I think it's helpful.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And anyway, this is James Holland with Our Town. I'm filling in for Dennis Weiss. You'll probably see him next month. Have a great day.